Welcome to the SABS. This is our first roundtable for this financial year, and within the next quarter, we will kick off other roundtables that we will invite you to, and please do continue to join in these roundtables. I'm going to hand the microphone over to our COO, Lungelo, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself, and Lungelo will then formally welcome and open today's roundtable for us. Thank you, Lungelo.
Thanks, Renee. Good morning, colleagues, to the ones that are here and also to the ones that are online. And also a special welcome to also the panelists. If I've known better, I would have put my makeup so that I can join you, but I didn't get the brief. I also see that we have had the last engagements in the electrotech, and I see some familiar faces that are coming back again. I'm not going to mention them so that I don't put them on the spot, but good to see you. Perhaps maybe the question that we should be asking ourselves as to why are we having these engagements? If one looks at the discussions that are taking place in terms of the 7th administration and the priority that is being emphasized on manufacturing, with chemicals and the other related industries playing a critical role there, we have not made a mistake. This is the right call. The second part is that the chemicals and materials and industry and as a sector plays a significant role with regards to all the aspects that talk to sustainability broadly. And therefore, it's important for us that as we discuss and have these discussions, have those matters and issues in mind. But we can't talk about sustainability and all in sundries going forward when we're not talking about the challenges that we currently face. And how do we then deal with those challenges, but having a clear view of the end in mind? So that's the challenge that I want to put forward. As an organization, we'll be celebrating 8 years next year. If one were to use an analogy of a human being, when you get to 70 and up, while you might have been very active in your early years, when you get to that age, all the ailment and all other aspects of life come into being. So you need to balance that and also balancing that and enjoying your retirement. So all what we are saying is that as a brand, we have been relevant in the past 8 years and we want to continue to be relevant. But such relevance can only be enhanced and improved through collaboration with stakeholders like you. We do understand that while we're going to be celebrating 8 years, there might be challenges that we're going to have. Either ailing infrastructure, severe competition that we are facing, whether the work that we are doing is aligned with what the industry is doing, and how do we then also address issues of non-responsiveness, turnaround time, capabilities, and all those sorts. Those are the things that I want to encourage all of us to have a robust conversation around them. We can only improve if we get that feedback. So don't shy away and say, now maybe SABS is going to ask. No. Tell us the way it is so that we can get to. But as you tell us, if you have a solution in mind, do deposit it. The feedback that we have received for all the engagements that we've had, we have incorporated it in our broader discussions. And also this one comes at a time where SABS is going to be having a strategy session over the weekend with the board. So that input will form part of what the industry is saying, what our clients are saying, and then so that then we can build it there. We have been going through a number of changes internally. Some of those changes have been concluded. You recall that SABS was placed under administration, and that process ended in November 2022. We have a board that is in place and running the organization with the committees. We've got executives that have been appointed. We've completed the org review process, but hindsight is the best teacher. There might be some certain things that we wish we could have done differently and we want to do differently, and we say we'll do them differently. So that we also deal with the elephant in the room. SABS still does not have a permanent CEO. But it does not mean that there is a vacuum, because we do have a colleague that is acting CEO with full delegation. So there's continuity, but we know now that from a reputation and a point of view, that needs to be addressed, and then we can get forward. So welcome to the first engagement, and I'm looking forward to the discussions and the constructive way in which we can take the organization forward. And on behalf of management, thanks to the team and everybody else who have made it possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Ngelo. Let me just introduce myself as well. My name is Renee Linda, and I'll be your program manager for the day. I'll help to facilitate the conversations. As we mentioned earlier, and hopefully that came through when you received the invitation, today is not death by PowerPoint. We want to have, if I can use your words, Ngelo, a robust conversation about the challenges that you are facing within the industry. And therefore, we've put together a panel, and obviously all specialists in their subjects field, and they will then talk around topics that we think is relevant. So please, I invite you, we're a small room, small enough for us to have conversation. We have colleagues online and clients online who can also join. Beyond will flag when there's a hand up for us then to give them an opportunity to contribute. So without fail, allow me the opportunity then to introduce the panel. And I think it's just fair to start with you, Mafale, because you've been here 23 years. So Mafale Peter, he's currently acting in the role of Head of Standards. And Mafale will take us through, your topic today will be standards related to SDGs. Mafale Peter holds a BTEC Construction Management qualification from the University of Johannesburg, as well as a certificate in Management Principles for first-time line managers from the University of South Africa. Thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy day. I'm really looking forward to listening to what you have to say. Our second panelist is Yolanda Roots. Welcome, Yolanda. Yolanda is an international registered compliance specialist, as well as a ISO lead auditor. Yolanda was raised in the farming and meat industry, and she grew up with order and structure, which guided her into becoming a certified integrated business management system ISO lead auditor, specifically ISO 22000, and HACCP lead auditor. She's also a registered corporate responsibility practitioner. Welcome, Yolanda. I'm looking forward to the value that you're going to bring to today's session. Then Emma Monyanga. Welcome, Emma. This is going to take a little bit longer. I was very impressed by your resume. Emma is a technical specialist with almost 20 years of experience at the NRCS, one of the technical infrastructure entities of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition of South Africa. Emma's current responsibilities include maintaining technical regulations for numerous safety critical products to protect public health, safety and the environment, such as plastic carrier bags, building materials, mechanical devices, chemical disinfectants, and personal protective equipment. She's also a member of several technical committees of the South African Bureau of Standards, and who is responsible for developing, as you know, and maintaining the South African national standards. Her involvement in standardization extends to technical committees at the African Organization for Standardization, or ARSO, and the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. Emma holds a Master in Commerce and Management Practice, specializing in international trade law and policy from the University of Cape Town, and a Master of Public Health from the University of Johannesburg. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for your valuable time in today's session. Kuleka Nafadi, welcome, Kuleka. Thank you also. I specifically know how busy you are, so thank you very much for time today. Kuleka has been with SABS since 2011. She's currently the manager of product certification, and she's also a ISO qualified ISO 9001 auditor. And lastly, but definitely, or what do you say? Last but not least. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Thabo Sapuru. Thabo is currently the divisional head for laboratory services, and Thabo has over 20 years experience in conformity assessments in laboratory testing services. He joined the SABS 21 years ago and has more than 12 years experience in senior and general management. Currently, Thabo is responsible for all testing operations at the SABS. Now, this is the impressive bit. Thabo holds a BSc in chemistry and physics, a BSc honours in engineering and technology management, an MSc in applied radiation science and technology, and participated in an executive development program and various short courses. Thabo is particularly interested in material science, operations, business development, and strategy. Welcome, Thabo. Thank you very much. We're going to kick off the discussions, and Peter, you are first on the agenda, so please do take us away.
Right, no, thanks Renee, and good morning to everyone. As already introduced, we are responsible for standards, but I thought that it will be important that we reflect on how our business has changed, based on the fact that there are always expectations from our stakeholders, from the general public, from regulators, when there are things that are happening in our society, and then they expect the SABS to be there and assist, and they will then be following us. So in line with what the topic of today is, we're looking at the standards that also relates to SDGs. But let me first say, our mandate has been changing over the years. So the 80 years that the CEO is talking about that the SABS has been established. I know when I speak to some of our stakeholders, they tell me that they've been participating in SABS technical committees for many, many, many years. So they'll mention, I've been here for 30 years, for 35 years, developing standards. But the standards have also been evolving as to how we develop them. There was the World Summit on Sustainable Development that was held a couple of years ago in Johannesburg, and out of that, certain committees, international committees, local committees were then established to respond to those sustainable development goals. But the biggest change that took place was in 2008, when then our mandate was drastically changed to say we have to focus on the development, the promotion and maintenance of South African national standards. Obviously, we can also develop other documents that are not necessarily South African national standards or that don't have the status of a South African national standard. Now, why am I mentioning this? There's always reference to the Consumer Protection Act, where stakeholders say there's an outbreak of listeriosis, there's an outbreak of cholera. How is the SABS responding to that? Where are the standards? Couldn't you do anything? But I'm mentioning the 2008 amendment to our mandate, because if you then take it just a few years earlier and look into our mandate of 1993, the Standard Act of 1993, that it empowered us to do certain things that we can no longer do, like regulating standards. And I'm also then bringing it to, the two main standards that then aligns to the SDGs, which we are looking at today. You look at the SABS 1853, which is the disinfectants, detergents, disinfectants and antiseptics for use in the food industry. Where if you look into how the committee was also even trying to respond to some of the challenges in the food industry, especially around this issue. where they wrote a standard in such a way where they recognize that SABS, we don't have this regulatory mandate. However, you still have the conformity assessment or conformity assurance mandate. And then they wrote it in that way where they talk about, you need to demonstrate compliance through certification and stuff like that, and that they took that whole approach in writing that. Now you then link it to the SDGs, various SDGs, because it will then cut across a number of them. And say, but was the committee consistent with how we develop standards and what we want to achieve with the standard itself? Others can argue to say, but standards shouldn't be containing such things as conformity assessment, because according to the ISO directives, you have to separate the two. Conformity assessment requirements must be separate from that. But to say, yes, you can, maybe there's a bit of a grey line between the two. Should the committee have done that or not? So there's a revision to say the standard needs to be revised. So the committee is now applying its mind as well, how they would like to revise this. They also include things to do with raw materials in the standard and how they should be treated, and they give the whole requirement. So we've looked at that as well internally and said, how can we do that? How can we be consistent with the international best practice, our own guidelines on how we write standards, and still be able to provide a technical solution that regulators would need to regulate whatever industry? Because one of these, we told, it's one of the sensitive industries, because if one thing goes wrong, you introduce a chemical in the food industry that might be harmful to the public, it becomes a public health issue, and which could result even in people losing their lives. So we are working with the committee to ensure that there is that consistency between the standards, but we don't also then, encroach on regulatory mandate, which we don't have. Again, also that we are consistent with our international obligations of how we write standards. But today, in my introduction, I also wanted to introduce the issue of our participation in the regional forums, especially with the AFCFTA being introduced, and what we are doing to prepare even ourselves as South Africa to take advantage of this free trade movement of goods and services, which is now enabled by the African Continental Free Trade Area. That within the number of African NSPs and different countries that are involved at the African Regional the Standards Organization, we continue to play a very leading role. But it shouldn't be us playing that leading role. We must say, how do those standards then translate to here? Because for the past 2 or so years, that regional body that we are very much active in has been running with a theme that we like so much. So they talk about one standard, one test, one certificate, accepted everywhere. So we are trying to harmonize standards within the continent itself, such a way that if I'm a manufacturer, and we've got the standards like since 1853, well, since 1853, be accepted if we go now next door to Botswana and say we've manufactured the standards according to this. And maybe Botswana, they've got their own standards, so it becomes, it puts extra cost on you as the manufacturer. However, if we were to then harmonize standards, we take the Botswana standards, we take everybody's standards within the continent, and say let's come up with one standard that can then be accepted in the continent. That even if we are going to go to the DRC and do trade with that particular country, with this certificate that we have that has been issued by Kaleka, the test report that has been issued by Tabo, will they accept it that is good enough? That obviously is the objective that we are trying to work towards. And to our stakeholders, we always say, as you are working through even the revision of these documents like 1853, which is a very, very important document, have a look into what is happening in the continent so that you don't, reinvent the wheel, or you don't create that situation where, we isolate ourselves as a country. We are there on our own. There's a number of committees that the regional body has established to enable us to work through that. And I'm happy, Rene and colleagues, that a number of our standards are taken up within that industry. So we become, like we've always been, the leaders, and as they always talk about the first mover advantage, that if we can put our standard forward and it can be knocked into shape for application within the entire region, then we would have won. The work that our local committees would have done, and it has taken it at the regional level, that's something that we want to go through. Not forgetting, as I close in my opening remarks, our obligation, that comes with us being the signatory to the World Trade Organizations, that there will always be international standards. Obviously, we've then aligned at a regional level to say, if international standards exist, obviously we shall use them. So we are still going to work within that agreement, which is now, as far as standards are concerned, Annexure 3 of the WTO TBT annexure that we're going to work through. So, Rene, I'm going to maybe for now just pause there in my just introductory remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matlai. We've got 5 or so minutes available in your slot. Do we have any questions? Or any comments? Anything from... Here's one. Thank you. And it is from Sylvester.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Mr. Matlali. I think the biggest problem that we have with ASO standards is the delay in adopting the standards. I've been part of the THC for the past 7 years, and because of the delay, it becomes difficult for us to use that advantage when you go out into the market. And I'm not only talking about in South Africa, I also talk about across Africa. So it would be, in our best interest to try and ensure that once a standard is adopted, it's published, there's a faster pace of adopting it with the other countries. I think that will help us. So maybe the SABS can play a role in ensuring that the adaptation doesn't take that long. Thanks.
Right, no, thanks, Mr. Manana, for the remarks. I must add that, a number of stakeholders have raised the same concern with, how long it takes for us to then adopt standards that we might have actively participated in their development, whether it's at the continental level or international level. So, in responding to this concern, we've introduced what we call a parallel adoption process. So let me give an example. So if ISO starts a project and we participate in that project, when they reach a stage called FD's, Final Draft International Standard, we are saying through this parallel adoption process, we should then be able to start our process locally. If the standard is published in the next, say, 3 months, 4 months or so, we need to be ready at that. So our new work item proposal should have been presented to the committee, approved by the committee, and then we can circulate that document to our local, to the public, the South African public, through public inquiry. Of course, we will mark it that it's still a draft standard. Some of you who've been in our committees for a long time knows that many years ago we used to do it, even publish a document that was a draft. However, that came with its own risks, that somebody will forget that the document that we published was still a draft. So we are trying to then make that alignment. But I'm happy, sir, to say we have listened and we are now, we've now introduced this parallel adoption process. It has not been fully implemented in other committees for various reasons, where some committees feel that the international standard could still change. And I think primarily within the IEC space, when they sent out their, in their case, they will be talking about CDV, which is the same as the final draft standard. But this is how we are trying to then say, how do we respond to this concern, Mr. Manana, that you are raising? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you. That concludes your slot, unless there's anybody else that has a question. I just want to go back to the online guest. Anybody from who's joined us virtually, Bjorn?
Not at the moment, we just have some technical video issue, but it's...
Thank you. Yolanda, we're going to move on. So let me reintroduce Yolanda Ritz. Yolanda, thank you very much again for joining us, and very interested to hear what you have to say. Yolanda has a wealth of experience, and she's very hands-on in this industry. Thank you, Yolanda.
Morning, everyone. I go nowhere without my trusty computer. In preparation for this roundtable, what I did is I only went and looked for hygiene in the food industry. So everything in the Foodstuffs Act, everything that goes in you and on you falls under the Foodstuffs Act, including disinfectants, detergents, antiseptics. So everything is chemically based, goes on or in you, falls under the Foodstuffs Act. Furthermore, there was 174 other acts and standards that is regulated that refers to chemicals and the correct use of chemicals in the industry. So this is everything that goes to the consumer. Your product's not necessarily directly to the consumer, but it's in line with the manufacturing of products for the consumer. So from an auditing perspective and from an advisory perspective, I'm going to state what I experience and what I see in the industry. After Listeria hit, we had a magnitude of regulations. VC 9100 came into play, directly linked to the hygiene of the products. Directly linked to SANS 10330 and 10049 becoming law. It was adopted as a law. 10049 refers directly to SANS 1853 and 1828 as the approved chemicals. So this is not a do you want to or not. It is a HACCP, SANAS HACCP requirement that you must comply with the regulations published and the compulsory specifications. Within that is another leg, which is regulation 1283, processed meat. That's the composition part. And we've got 2410, which is raw processed meat. This all references back to regulation 908 with amendment 607 clearly stating that HACCP by a SANAS approved with our SABS standards, SANS 1033 and 10049 being the law. So as auditors, as technical advisors, when we audit the regulation, we audit a system against the requirements and objectives of a regulation. We don't audit the regulation, we don't audit the standard. We audit your system against the objectives that you need to reach. So in 10049, as auditors, and I'm standing in a Vienna plant or the meat plant that is governed under Regulation 908 Amendment 607. It clearly states there that in the cleaning and disinfectant, all cleaning disinfectant items shall be appropriate for the intended, shall be as a legal requirement as per the SABS definitions. So we don't pick and choose what is right and what's not. If we require a MSDS data sheet with an SABS stamp on it from a company that's gone through the process of being audited, SABS 1853 audits are very rigorous, extremely. You're going to find somebody in non-compliance for using chemicals that is not in line with the South African requirements. So we can say, okay, fine, it comes from overseas. We in South Africa, we follow South African rules. The Consumer Protection Act states clearly that we refer to the Standards Act 8, and I love the new one, by the way, love it. Now it's my go-to person. So the Standards Act states clearly, if you don't have a regulation or amendment or notice, your next step is the Standards Act. There is your guidelines. So as auditors and as advisors into the food industry, so everything under the Foodstuffs Act, everything that the consumer is going to inherit, must comply with the regulations. And everybody forgets that little last page with references that is used. Inside SANS 10041, it even states there, note, SANS 1828 and SANS 1853 gives details of the requirements and safety of the cleaning chemicals. When the investigation on Listeria was done, the very first thing the Department of Health at all facilities did was go for the chemicals. Immediately. Did it have an SABS stamp on it? Did they get training on it? Was the dilution correct? At the core of anything under the Foodstuffs and Agricultural Act, everything comes down to hygiene. You cannot kill everything in a CCP in all fields. So we don't have temperature to kill it. We do not have formulation. Your recipe is irrelevant to the safety of the food. Everything comes back to hygiene. And if you're not in compliance with South African law, why worry about what others are doing when we've got everything from the SABS, everything from the NRCS, everything with references and guidelines? My job is to take all of the regulations and put them coherently into one system so that everything speaks to everyone. That's what I do. I don't see each one individually. So my point here is, we've got a level playing field for everyone. We've got a standard. We've got the NRCS regulating. We've got everything, so it's a level playing field that we are engaging in. And that is what we need to bring into everybody's, because under non-SABS registered chemicals, labeling is not correct. False information, information that's not clearly defined, information that's not clearly representing what it is, training of that chemicals, use of that chemicals. So the SABS 1853 and 1828 mark is there for a reason, because within that audit, the labels are clearly audited. The raw material allowed in South Africa is clearly audited. Something coming in from overseas needs to comply with South African regulations. If it doesn't, you have to change it or you can't. The same with the label. You can import something and it's another country's language. What does South Africa say? First language is English. The same with chemicals. Chemicals is even worse. We've got children that cannot read. We've got people that work in the industry that cannot read. They need training. So the SABS 1828 and 1853 is designed for the protection of the person using it, the facility using it, the objective of hygiene reached, and the end consumer is safe. That is where we're going with this. So you cannot say the one doesn't. You have to think everything globally and stick to one rule and play on a level playing field. If with chemicals, we register with the NRCS. If you're not registered with the NRCS, you can't do anything. But you can't bypass certain little snippets, but then go and say, we are in line with We don't have SABS 23, but we are in line with and make the claim. We always say, you can state it if you can't claim it if you can't state it. Chemically, physically, scientifically. So from an auditing perspective and from a consulting perspective, you cannot just pick and choose what you want. You're either in line or not in line. But the labeling is for me a serious issue. The raw materials used is for me a serious issue. And we've had this discussion in technical committees about people co-packing for other people and then double backing on their qualification, but they dilute them. Which is also a major problem we see in the industry. So if you as a rep say, we are in line with SABS to the person that's got a food facility, they're going to believe you, because why shouldn't they? And that is where the abuse comes in. And then in an audit, somebody fails and they say, but we don't understand why. So that's the gist. There's so much more stuff on this list, but that's the gist of our side from a compliance, advisory, and auditing side.
Thank you, Lana. I'm sure we might have a few questions or comments from the people in the room. Anybody? Bjorn, I saw a hand, so let's just acknowledge the hand on the MS Teams group, and then I'm going to hand over to...
Thank you, Yolanda. My question is on the safety of our food that is sold in townships and villages. How do we ensure now that the food that is consumed is also monitored? And what kind of standards do we use? And how do we hold the people who are selling accountable when they are selling counterfeit goods? We know with what happened in the past where children are consuming those stuff that have expired. So where does the regulation play a role there? Thank you.
Okay, so I can't talk on behalf of the Department of Health, but what I do know is there is a big push in the industry. We call it blitz attacks, that is taking place with all the departments interlinking in doing compliance checks. Unfortunately, you close one today, tomorrow another one pops up. But I feel as a community and as a country, if everybody is part of the process and everybody is educated, so education is key on what is your rights, what is required, and have easy access to everything. I know the Consumer Goods Council's got a very nice portal where you can access. SABS has always got news flash. So I think there it would be on the private sector as well as government taking the initiative to go and help and educate and make sure that our kids aren't dying at schools.
Thanks. Thanks, Yolanda. I've got a question and a comment. The comment is around 10449. As you said, it refers to 1828 and 1853. I just have a query as to why it does not refer to 1827 and 1829, which are lubricants and water treatment chemicals used in the food industry. So that's something that I think we just need to look at. And I'm sure, because I only deal with those standards, there might be other standards that we need to see whether those come into that way. And then my question is around auditors, not necessarily you, but in my experience in the industry, there's a number of auditors that do not understand the difference between food safe and safe to use in a food surface. So I just wanted to ask, is there an organization or a group where these some of the auditors are trained in order to make them aware of what is, the differences between the different terms, as well as updating them on the standards that we keep on updating, because we're busy with 1853, 1828 is 2023, and we continue to update these standards, but whether they are aware of what's happening in these standards, we're not too sure. And in the end, then it comes to that when they do audits, there's findings that you can actually dispute within 5 minutes, and but because they are not aware of the changes and the terminology that we use in standards writing, it becomes a problem. So I think that's something that I think the industry needs to look into to try and see if they can assist. And you spoke about labeling. We all know that we adopted GHS in 2019. And I still go around and I see products that still don't comply to GHS, and it's actually legislation. It's not even a standard, it's legislation, but we keep on seeing this. So it's also important to make the auditors aware of what the latest legislations are. So I would be quite keen to know if there's an organization where training is done, or where you guys meet and have meetings, because I think it's important for our industry that people understand the system that we operate in. Thank you.
Okay, on number one, I only reference those two because I've got 78 more that is referenced in Wonderful now. So I only emphasize on that. Lubricants, 100%. Did an audit last week, found a can of lubricants, not food safe in a facility. And all of a sudden it just walked in there by itself. So yes, so that is. On the auditor's point of view, this is an issue, and that is why I went to Australia to go and study auditing. Because in South Africa we've got SADCA, but we are very limited. Lead auditor course is 5 days, and then you're an auditor. Hence the reason why I went to Australia to go and study, because the application of laws into auditing, into systems, was paramount on how they do it. And we all know New Zealand, Australia is extremely strict on their food. I did register with SADCA to do that auditor training, the application auditing, the understanding auditing, the definitions auditing. So what you're experiencing is something that we have been struggling with, because auditors audit on a checklist. In the last 10 years, we've changed your auditing style, and the SABS is also adopted. With 2015, 9001 became risk-based approach. Your very first introduction into any ISO standard or SABS is risk-based approach. That did not land with auditors. There is the gap. You audit the risk within a facility against the objectives of standards and regulations. So yes, we do, and I am going to, I've already registered, we've got the training center, and we're going to invite auditors to give a clear understanding on how you should approach something. It's not how I like it in this color, or I like it. We do get those auditors, I cannot speak for them. What I can do is be the difference in bringing and raising better auditors for the future. So I've got a bunch of youngsters in my organization, and I'm training them to be better, to be risk-based approach, to be practical, to use common sense. It's not a tick and flick exercise. And at no point did the SABS ever say, or the NRCS say, this is a tick and flick. It says, this is the guidelines. The very first, this is the guidelines to food. Food safety and food quality is two different things. Quality is what the product looks like. Safety is what you can't see. That is our job. That's why chemicals are so important. So from auditor, I am a single person taking on a lot, but if I can make one change and one better auditor, then I've succeeded.
Thank you, Lana. I'm sure there will be plenty of opportunity to engage during the Q&A on this topic. Thank you. We're going to move on and we're going to give Emma an opportunity to talk to us. Emma, thanks again for availing yourself, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Program Director, and greetings to everyone. I would like to thank the leadership and management of the SABS for this opportunity, because I think from just the two previous speakers, we all have we now understand better how the system is so interconnected. So we have so many moving parts within the space, but we need to come together and understand how these parts work together to get the ultimate objective. And that ultimate objective is to have safe chemicals and to protect public health and safety. So as the NRCS, we are honored and very pleased to be part of that and to contribute to that system that would therefore ensure the safety of South Africans and also assist our businesses to thrive within this space, because we understand that although it's about the safety of chemicals, it's also about having a business environment that is conducive for everyone to operate. And so we want to be there for everyone to assist in building this system and working together with all our stakeholders. So just maybe to give background on the NRCS, I believe, because the faces I see in the room, it's people that we've been working with for many, many years. So I just believe that most of you already understand what we do as the NRCS. To start off with, we are a regulator within the DTIC. We are one of the technical infrastructure entities, so we are a sister company to the SABS. And I think when we look at how we do business as the NRCS, there is no way we can operate without the SABS, because all our business processes are actually based on the work of the South African Bureau of Standards. We need standards, we need testing, certification, and all those systems assist us to be an effective regulator. So then we regulate many different commodities, but for today we are going to focus on chemical disinfectants, because this is what the industry we are engaging with today requires. So to start off with, I would just want to go back to the history of our compulsory specification. We come with it all the way from I think 2009. My mind just went blank there. But we went through a major review in the past 10 years, and a new compulsory specification was published in 2017. And that brought a lot of changes that were difficult. I mean, the transition was difficult, not only for the industry, but also for us as a regulator. However, we recognize the need that as South Africa, we also need to move with innovation, to move with what is regarded as a best practice within this space. So when we developed the compulsory specifications, we applied a few new principles that were previously not that were not in the previous compulsory specification. For instance, we moved away from ingredient-based or active-based compulsory specifications. We wanted to have standards that are based on methodologies that can be used for any active, but then be able to give us evidence of the efficacy of the product itself. So that is what we focused on, and we wanted to know that it will work under conditions for which it is supposed to work. So we also moved into the risk-based approach. So we had a classification of risk. So for instance, institutions, domestic, were classified as low risk, and then the food industry is moderate risk, and our highest risk was the disinfectants that are used in the medical field. And then we had prescribed different prescriptions for those industries, especially when it came to conformity of production, because for food we require that all food disinfectants should be manufactured by entities that are also certified. So certification became a major rule that everyone had to comply with. So SANS 1853 was one of the standards that we require in our VC for disinfectants that are intended for the food industry, and also for disinfectants that are intended for the medical area. We also require that the companies should also be certified, and this was a difficult one because although we have SANS 13485, we know there are many people who are still not certified to that, and but then we allowed ISO 9001 to also be accepted for that purpose. So if you have a quality management system in place, you could have product certification, or you could also have a quality management system that would then serve for our purposes to ensure that there is a structured system that is used to ensure that the disinfectants that are manufactured in that facility actually meet the requirements. And there were also new requirements. For instance, the SDS was not in the previous VC. So now with the SDS, we know we are moving to also the GHS, so we need to look at that alignment within our specifications. Packaging is a critical issue. Disinfectants must be packaged properly and so that they can remain stable. So stability of the product to ensure that it remains effective throughout its value chain within the market. And we also, as part of that, so I should have mentioned that we wanted to harmonize our standards with some of our biggest trade partners, which is why we adopted the standards that we are using currently in the VC, and also to have the principles of having, the standards would test for bactericidal efficacy, fungicidal efficacy, so we are able to say this product is broad spectrum, or it can only work on certain types of microorganisms. So that also helped to ensure that the disinfectants are classified correctly for what they can do, the area in which they are applied, and also ensure that there is enough information that is supplied with that chemical, so that the end users, because we must never lose the focus on the end users, because they are the ultimate beneficiaries of the product. To make sure that they are informed, so your instructions for use, your labeling, your packaging should be able to assist them to apply that a chemical disinfectant accurately, so that they can actually have the efficacy that they require. Compatibility with surfaces is also important, so that's where your labeling come in. It needs to be very clear how this product should be used, how it should be handled, how it should be stored, and also all the safety warnings and the emergency warnings should be on the product. So that was what was brought into the VC, and that was to try and innovate the industry, to push the South African industry to be on par with what is happening globally, so that we can also say we are able to do some of these great things within our country. So the VC also has administrative processes, and I think this is the one that brought shock into the system, because all the registration certificates that we have prior to the new VC, they had to be withdrawn, and everybody had to apply for a new registration certificate based on the new VC. So that means your products had to be retested. You had to apply again to the NRCS, submit all the required information, evidence of efficacy that they needed, test reports, your certificates for certification. And then we went through a process of reassessing each and every product that we had and new products that are coming in. And we then started to roll out inspections based on the latest requirements in the VC. So all that was something that not only the industry had to grapple with, but also as a regulator, we also had to have processes in place to update our internal procedures and ensure that we can have assessment procedures that would then give us, enable us to decide on whether a product complies or not, or whether we should issue the registration certificate. So I think now we are at a stage where we have moved forward, and the industry has become comfortable. When I asked our approvals divisions if there are any glitches that they're experiencing right now, they said no, most of the applications are coming in well, and they are getting all the information they need. The registrations are moving. So even though we had glitches at the beginning, all those things have been sorted out, and most of the applications that they are receiving are actually being processed on time, and they are issuing those registration certificates. So after all that, now we want to know what is the impact of everything that we have done, because regulation comes at a cost, not only to industry but also to society in general. So when we come up with regulation, we want to know what is the impact of that regulation, and that is the phase that we are going into now that we have implemented this new VC. We will be going through a review process where we want to get feedback from our stakeholders. How are they experiencing the latest VC? Is it working for them? What can we improve, and what else can we do to ensure that we have a regulation that achieves our objectives? So even though we can say we have successfully transitioned to the new VC, we still have some challenges. For instance, one of the most difficult part of the transition was having the testing laboratories getting ready for the new VC with the new standards. That took a long time, and even up to today, there are still standards that we cannot test for, especially biocidal standards. Our clients are sending their products overseas at a huge cost. So that tells us that we need to do something as a country to ensure that we are able to support the industry, because the cost of testing in this area is astronomical, and that is a huge impact for the industry. Certification as well, because our regulation requires that you must have certification. That is a cost as well. So when you look at the costs that are applied in this industry, you then realize that there is a lot of challenges, and that could be a barrier for smaller operators as well. So if you are a new manufacturer, you want to come into the space, the first thing that will hit you is the testing costs. Very huge amount of money required. And if you need certification as well, then you'll also be hit with other costs related to that. And also the NRCS, of course, you have to pay us levies based on your production units, and that all that becomes the cost for doing business in the space. So the question is, how can we make it better? Can we improve? And unfortunately, as you know, the state of the economy, our costs as a regulator are also going up. We are struggling with that. And we are also struggling with budget cuts. So, but it's something that we should all work towards. Hopefully, in the future, we'll have an environment that is conducive for everyone. So, just also looking at the bigger picture, because as I said, chemicals are not only about just one role player. There are many role players, and we should be able to work together as the different role players. So we come into a space that is highly fragmented, and I think that is one of the concerns that we often get from the people that we regulate, or the regulated industries. So when you working with chemical disinfectants, they can also be registered as a agricultural remedy, stock remedy. In some cases, it can be also be designated as a hand sanitizer, or it could be a medical device. So that's all these different regulators with different regulations, and all targeted at the same products, become a difficult issue to handle. However, it is what we have in South Africa, and unfortunately we have to work within that space. So what we try to do as different regulators is to collaborate as much as possible to see where does this product fit in, what are the claims that are being made on the label, what are the applications for that. And we also try not to encroach into each other's regulatory space. For instance, we had to exclude veterinary remedies because the Department of Agriculture requested us to exclude that. So they didn't want us to have that overlap. So in our VC, we excluded that completely, because we were happy to do that, since we focus mostly on human health and safety, and also for the foodstuffs and medical area. So that is now a challenge that unfortunately business operators have to deal with, and to try and manage within these different regulators. So I think maybe now I'll touch on some of the other challenge that I wanted to mention is that we are also encountering non-compliant disinfectants, and according to our act, we can actually confiscate them so that we remove them completely from the market. So we do confiscate these products. However, we sit with a huge problem as a regulator that we cannot dispose them, and that touches on environmental laws and environmental regulations. So you sit with a product, you don't have an SDS, you don't know what chemicals are in that product, and you cannot keep it forever because obviously some of them are unstable. We get leakages. We have so many problems with the chemicals that we pick up from the market. So I think it is something that should be communicated clearly, that if you manufacture a chemical, make sure that your documentation is correct. We need an SDS for us to be able to dispose non-compliant disinfectant, even if it's just a matter of efficacy. If we are going to send it to the landfill site or wherever, we need to have information that will support us doing that. So the disposal of these chemicals is very expensive, not only from the storage and also because we have to work with waste disposal companies. It is a huge cost to us as a regulator, and we are looking for ways now to try and transfer that cost to the owner of the product because it has become unsustainable for us. So that is something that I want to ensure that everybody is aware of, so that even if we agree with you as a manufacturer that this product cannot be corrected, they need to be removed from the market, we need to be able to dispose them in accordance with environmental laws. So I think I'll now touch on some of the new concerns that we're also picking up as to where can we go as the chemicals industry. So I think that it was mentioned, the issue around toxicology, how safe are these products? So with our VC, we don't look at whether there are residues, whether if it's applied on surfaces, what type of effect it will have on that. For instance, if it's medical instruments which are immersed in this chemicals, then they use it to conduct human health procedures, what is the impact on that? So that is what we need to start thinking on as an industry. We need to ensure that our toxicological information is clear. The SDS does assist us, but it's not enough. We need to do more studies around some of these chemicals so that we can say this chemical is safe. The second issue is antimicrobial resistance. So this is an issue that has been discussed in the industry as a whole. Disinfectants are contributing to this problem. And not only them, but all microbial substances. So we need to ensure that we also innovate, ensure that our products are able to rise to the challenge when hospitals are telling us that they are having challenges with disinfection because some of they are having these drug-resistant bugs in the hospital environment. So that means this is a topic that should be also handled within this industry. We are also getting a lot of information, or we are approached by other manufacturers who want to bring in alternative disinfectants. So biological disinfectants, we are getting things based on probiotics, enzymes, and we're also getting mechanical devices. But we know that, for instance, if it's UV lamps, it could be regulated under the medical devices regulations. So these are some of the things that the industry or some businesses are looking into bringing into the market. However, our current VC is not able to respond to this. So if somebody says, no, mine is a disinfectant, but it's not a chemical. So that there are claims that it works, it can give you the same benefit as a chemical disinfectant, then how do we test it? How do we make sure that when that product is put in the market, it will achieve the desired effect? And one other issue that came up from a meeting I attended just last week was the issue of poisonings. The Poison Center in Cape Town, they are collecting data around chemicals, especially in the domestic environment. So they reported a lot of poisonings from detergents and disinfectants. So they had a proposal that we should actually have safety caps for household disinfectants. So I then briefed the meeting that this was on our table in the past. We discussed it with the industry. However, at that time, we didn't have data to support that there are problems that we should be addressing around this issue. And now, if we get enough data, we are willing to get into that discussion with the industry, especially through our review process that we will be doing in the next process. So we understand the cost, we understand why it might not be something that the industry will embrace because many of the costs, but it is something that we should discuss and see that maybe we can have additional safety mechanisms to protect the users. And the last thing I want to say, I want to thank Yolanda for what she said, because the issue of training is very critical. We did studies at hospitals, and you know the lady that does disinfecting in most of the areas within the hospital has maybe basic education. They are not trained properly to handle some of these substances. So it means that as an industry, we should focus on developing the ability to reach the end users, because you may have a perfectly formulated chemical with all the safety and information provided with it, but if the receiver of that product is not able to understand how to interact with that product, they don't understand the dilution ratios, for instance, they don't understand contact times. These are technical things that only us in the industry probably understand, but the end user should be able to understand those things, because otherwise we are just putting chemicals in the environment that may or may not be disinfecting at all. So that is a concern. So that means that we should actually focus on training, and we should not only within the industry, but we should look at especially our critical users. I think the medical area needs a lot of attention, and we need to start paying attention to their needs as well. I just remembered one more issue, the restricted and banned chemicals. So we need this industry to be aware of what is restricted, what is not allowed, because that is one safety issue that we all must actually pay attention to. Ensure that your ingredients or the substances that you use in your formulation, ensure that you know the status of those chemicals, and do not put things that could actually have long-term adverse health effects on our population. So we need to take safety seriously. We need to take application seriously, because I think that application of these chemicals is critical for us to be able to get their benefits. So thank you very much. I thought I should share those insights with you, and questions are welcome. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was very valuable input from your side, and I think a couple of things that came through, we've already heard concerns and previous questions, so I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions that will allow in the Q&A session, if that is okay. I do recognize the hand virtually. We will definitely give opportunity in the Q&A session. So you spoke about, testing, certification, so it's going to link nicely to what you have to share with us, Kuleka. So I'm going to allow Kuleka an opportunity to talk specifically around local content verification and how that also would impact and contribute to the specific industry. Thanks.
Thank you, Renee. I'm not sure if I'm audible. So much. First, I would like to talk about conformity assessments in general. So we offer product certification, system certification. By definition, certification is voluntary. So we offer SANS 1828, and I'll speak specifically for this industry. SANS 1828, 1853, 1827, 1829, those are standards specifically for the food industry. So they talk about safety of those chemicals for use in the food industry. So as I said, generally it's voluntary, but the regulation makes standards then become compulsory. So 1853 as an example, there's a requirement for the disinfectants to be registered with the NRCS. 1828, also the GAS requirements, the Global Harmonization System, makes the verification of the raw materials that are used in the manufacturing of the products a requirement. So while you look at 1828 and may see that there's no regulation applied to that, but there's the GS requirement that has to be fulfilled. So in talking about conformity assessments in general, the definition is the verification of fulfillment of requirements of a particular standard. So you've got different levels. We may have first party, second party, and third party. Third party is what we offer. First party being when an organization conducts its own internal audits and may give declarations about and guarantees about their products or their processes. And second party is typically where suppliers or retail purchasers or retail companies conduct audits against the suppliers to verify the product or the services. And then third party, which is what we offer, certification, independent attestation about the conformance or compliance if there's a regulation involved there to the standards. So I'll dip into then certification. We offer accredited certification, and we are accredited by SANAS against the requirements of an international standards, ISO 17065 for product certification. Our offering of product certification requires that a manufacturer operates a quality management system that complies to the requirements of ISO 9001. It may not be certified, but there must be a quality management system in place that we can audit, and that's all to ensure consistency of product, consistency of quality of the product. So in terms of the certification that we offer, and as I say, we are accredited by SANAS, so SANAS regularly audits us. And the question always arises, who audits the auditor? We are audited by SANAS to verify and confirm competency within the certification body, all the way from auditors and everybody who's got anything to do with certification, from our sales process, so it's from beginning to end. We have to demonstrate competence. So, and the competency development process is an ongoing process. People get trained, and as things change, as standards get revised, people get trained on the new standards. We've got calibration processes. But I'll go back to the beginning when we onboard an auditor. And I'm looking at you now. There's training that takes place. And people don't understand why it would take a candidate auditor close to a year to get them registered. So it's that initial training that takes place, and then we get them involved in on-the-job training where they observe other auditors conducting the audit function, and then they get an opportunity to audit under supervision. We subject them to a battery of tests. We do on-site reviews before we can deem them competent. On-site reviews, and they go through interview panels as well before we deem them competent. And so when they are finally ready and assigned off as competent auditors to go and audit, again, the auditing is against specific requirements. So you've got the standard as your basic. So in this case, we take 1853. The auditor understands the regulatory requirements within 1853. We, in addition, have a GPC, which has got additional requirements, but also acts as a contract between our certification clients and ourselves. There's the SPC, which stipulates additional requirements which are not in the standard requirements, like the frequencies of us conducting audits and the frequencies of testing, and additional QC requirements, how long QC records should be kept by the organization, things like retention of samples, should there be complaints, would be able to get hold of samples, so the frequencies or the timelines for maintenance or for keeping product. And so and it's an ongoing, so initially when a person doesn't know anything about certification, applies about certification, these are the things we will communicate. We have to conduct an audit. We get a lot of inquiries from people sourcing product from overseas and saying it is already certified against this standard, can you put the SABS mark on it? But that is not how our process works. The rigor in our process includes us going to the factory. So wherever the factory is, we need to get to the factory. We need to get to the factory to audit. We need to get to the factory to take samples. But specifically for 1828 and 1853, the precursor to the whole process is the verification of the formulation. So it's the toxicity test verification that has to be done, and the formulation has to be then signed off as being, after having verified the raw materials that they are safe to use in the food industry, then that gives a tick that we may proceed with the process. So we conduct audits, we select samples in our audits, beginning of the process, the receiving of the raw materials to the end, to dispatching, warehousing of the product, conditions of storage of the product in the warehouse are verified. And once you get that certificate, that permit that says you have fulfilled all the requirements of SANS 1828 or 1853, after we've also verified that if it's 1853, you also comply with regulatory requirements. When you get that certificate, it's not a once-off thing. So for the life of that 3-year permit, we schedule audits, regular audits, and regular sampling for testing. And we do a verification test once a year. And on the back of that, we've got verification of your QC processes in line with what we've stipulated in the SPC. So we look at quality records each time we come for the audit. Now, within certification rules, obviously when we're auditing the outcomes of the audit, there may be negative outcomes like non-conformities, and organizations are given time to address the non-conformities. But there is and in addressing the non-conformities, there's engagement. Sometimes we may need to go back to the factory to verify how you've addressed the non-conformities. So there's a regular surveillance in the life of that permit. So the testing, as I said, once a year as a minimum, also related to the risk of the product, and also as our activities, future activities are informed by results of previous audits. By that I mean, it may be that based on the outcome of the audits that we did, we may want to increase the frequency of auditing, we may need to increase the frequency of testing based on the outcome of the audits. So there is a difference, and I want to talk about that now. So that is certification. That is how you get certification, because there's regular surveillance. Annually, twice per annum we audit, we test, and that continues on and on for the life of your permit. When at any stage of the permit life, as we do our verifications, there is failure. Could be testing failure, could be failure in your quality management system, and if you're not able to address those non-conformities that are raised within the given timelines, your certification may be suspended. And if we are not able to lift the suspension because we're not satisfied with the measures that have been taken, that certification may be cancelled. Okay, so I want to address something that is quite pervasive in the industry, the claims of certification using a test report. And the difference therein is, and I must talk about, in certification being third-party attestation, the sampling of the product is done independently. So we do not accept a manufacturer or representative of the manufacturer bringing a sample here, because that could be a sample that is specially prepared to pass. So we have to audit and check the capability and the competency of the process to manufacture that product, and to be able to continually and consistently provide product that complies to the requirements. So we do random sampling during our audits, and samples are brought here. So remember that test report doesn't stand on its own when we're talking product certification. There would have been verification of the quality of the raw materials going into the manufacturing of the product, of the competency of the people working in that factory environment, manufacturing the product all the way through. Then you've got a test report where, in the test report space where a manufacturer wants to test something, they are free to bring their product here for testing. And that's all they're asking for, a test report. That test report relates specifically to that sample. And if anybody has seen a test report from the SABS, there is a note at the bottom of the test report that states that the result of this conformity evaluation relates only to the sample that has been brought here, and does not say anything about any prior batches manufactured or future batches that are going to be manufactured. Because at this point in time, SABS has not had any engagement, has not seen the production process, has not seen the controls within the manufacturing process to say anything about the product. And that therein lies the difference between a test report and product certification. And so when you've undergone the process of getting your product approved, when your quality management system has been assessed, the sample has been taken, and testing has been done, and you've got product certification, you are legitimately given a license, a permit to claim that your product is SABS approved, knowing that the responsibility is upon yourself to ensure that you continue maintaining the requirements, because we are coming back, and we will keep coming back to ensure that you maintain that conformity or that quality of product and work. Then there's the other claim that we see a lot in the market, claim of SANS compliance. So you get a product claiming not SABS approved, but claiming to be SANS approved. And so anybody can claim that they comply to a standard, but they've got to demonstrate that they are. And so for that manufacturer that claims their product to be SANS compliant, they should be able to demonstrate that every single batch of that product that they've dispatched has been tested fully against the requirements of that standard. And so and the Standards Act is very clear about that. No manufacturer may claim compliance or conformance to a standard unless they truly are. So we have had engagements, and this information has come, our way. Claims about SANS approval, not a problem if you can claim it, if you can validate it. So buyers, purchasers, and all those people who want to obtain those products where those claims are being made, there's nothing wrong with that. But you need to make sure then that you get the test reports that you can translate to that you can reference to that particular batch, that batch was, because it can't be a blanket statement that when you've tested one product in 2022, then it follows that all your products that you're going to manufacture are SANS 1828 compliant. And where is the attestation for that? Because if you cannot demonstrate that you've been audited consistently against the requirements of the standard. And one of the things that happens in certification audits, that formulation that was upfront approved gets verified during the certification audits to see if any changes have taken place. So there are many ways of doing it, through the bill of material, through your batch documentation. We verify that. And if there's any change to the formulation, then we have to reassess the formulation again to verify if any new raw materials have been brought in. Those raw materials are still safe for use in the industry. So in dealing with these false claims, we've enlisted the support of our legal department, and a lot of manufacturers have pleaded ignorance in that regard. But as a manufacturer, you've got the responsibility to understand when you make those claims that you know what you're talking about. When you invoke SANS 1828, you need to understand what SANS 1828 requires of you to do. Okay, so that's the one part I wanted to talk about. So with regards to formulation assessments, I've spoken about that, and that also that is a continuous verification that gets that we do. It's not a once-off thing. We continue to verify that, and as Sylvester rightly said, we audit against the latest requirements of the standards. So in the claims that are made, we see product manufactured recently that still references 2017 standards. We also see some disinfectants referencing the old act. So it's very important for anybody who deals or who buys these products, disinfectants and detergents, to be aware of the latest standards and the latest regulation. I think I've touched on all I wanted to talk about. Oh, and lastly, when one looks at standards, you would see that in the fulfillment of the requirements, as an example for 1853, there's a list of normative references outlined in the standard for the fulfillment or for conformity against that standard, and we're talking full conformity, full compliance to the requirements of the standard. We also see claims of certification against the test method, which purchasers and buyers of products should be very much, and users of products should be very much aware of. For example, you've got in the disinfectant space, you've got EN 1276, which is a standard that has been adopted in South Africa as well, wholly adopted. There is a SABS 51276. It's only a test method for bactericidal activity, but we see a lot of claims about that the product is certified against a test method, and there are many others. And so we need to be discerning about these things, because that is not a certification standard, and we need to be able to distinguish them. And often you find queries about cost. Certification, SABS certification is costly, and when you want to do a comparison, you actually realize the comparison is against a test method when we are doing a full battery of tests and auditing at those set frequencies that we do. Okay, Chair.
Thank you, Kuleka. That was a mouthful. We seem to come to close this circle with Tabo. We started with standards, and Lana, you spoke about auditing and advisory. Then we delved into the regulations and linked very nicely with certification that Kuleka spoke about. I think if you talk about cost, I think it's very important to link cost to risk. So if something goes wrong, how costly does it become then versus having certification in place? Mr. Sapuru, can I hand over to you to end this panel discussion for us, please?
Thank you, Brunei, and good morning again, colleagues. My name is Tabo. I was introduced as such. I see a lot of technical people here. So when the questions becomes technical, at least we have a panel within a panel that will handle those. And thanks again, colleagues, fellow panel members. I think it was also opportune for me to be the last, so that I have less to say. The bulk of the linkages from standards to auditing regulations that references the standards to certification, and the last element being in the value chain, you would also then realize that there's a testing element. And in terms of the testing element, there are about maybe 2 or 3 comments I would want to make. The first being that about 10 years ago, we had a big issue in terms of our changes in policy. And that issue emanated from us being or requiring for all manufacturers and users of testing services at the SABS to only allow us to test to full standards. And I'm sure because most of yourselves here use our services frequently, you are aware of the changes that has since come back. So in terms of, so we have 2 types of test reports that we are issuing. The first is the state, it's a test report that would cover or issue a statement of conformity. And the last one is the test report that we would issue but will not make any statement of conformance. On the first part, and this emanate from anyone, and I'm now talking about anyone that wants to make use of our services, can always reference and say, I'm developing this new product. Here is a formula. My claims are related to either SANS 1853 or 1828. Please test. We will go through the chain because in the beginning there's a need around these standards for us to do formulation assessment. So the formulation assessment, and I know that there are current issues. The formulation assessment is the start, because whatever you are saying you are putting in your product, that formula is only known by yourselves. And there's been a new change that then happened around the, is it 10.234, that then required for all formulations to be reassessed. I know that there's an issue around, and there's been a question around costs. This formula has not changed. Why do you want us to redo it? And I think it ties nicely to what colleague was saying in her last remarks, that standards change all the time, including this standard, which therefore requires that whatever you make as a claim must be current. So we use the current version of the standard. What this then calls for is that we needed to redo formulation assessments, all of them, so that we link them to the current version. So I know there's going to be another question around cost related to the same. I may not be able to respond to it today because it called for an internal discussion to then say, how do we cost or price without necessarily killing manufacturers? This element of the work that we now have to redo. So that is an alignment we are busy working on, and we will then inform the industry of what we have then decided on. So back to the types of reports. The first report that we issue, you're asking for us to do the full suite of parameters. We test, we will be able to conclude on whether the product complies or not. The second report, which is same or treated same, is the one that our certification team would issue, and is linked to a 3-year cycle of the product. So they will tell us that this year only covered these 3 parameters. But because they are making decisions on whether to continue to allow the manufacturer to use the SABS mark on their product or not, we need to confirm to them on whether those 3 parameters are compliant. So we then issue that report, then we'll issue a statement of compliance. The third category of test reports that we also issue and confirm on whether it complies or not. Whether we tested for the full suite or selected parameters is when we have the regulator saying we have, and the regulator have, I think they've said it enough. On a risk-based approach, here is a product, we are worried about these parameters. Can you test and tell us what's happening? To enable the regulator to make a determination or a decision on whether to recall or not to recall products, we then would test in line with their requirements and confirm on whether the product complies with those selected parameters. On the other side, these are the ones that we are saying we will be testing but will not issue a statement of conformance. Is when a manufacturer is busy with their developing a product, they then say, Norman, there's one or two parameters we're interested to know so that we can make a decision on whether to change it or not to change it. They will come here and tell us that, Norman, we are busy with developing this product. Can you just check this for us so that we are then able to develop the product further? We'll test, give you the results, because you're going to be using these results to, in your own process, decide on the next steps. So we'll issue those results. And the last one is when a manufacturer or anyone else or the user of the product comes here and asks for a selected parameters testing. We treat that the same way as product development. So we'll test, issue results, because we at that point are not empowered to make a statement of conformance or non-conformance. So those are the parameters that I thought I needed to cover. The other comment I wanted to make is related to, and I think Renee has covered it quite well. This cost element must always be balanced, or discussion balanced with the risks. What could go wrong? And because we are here, and we are not here to only take over responsibility of manufacturers. We are here to support you so that you are then able to safeguard your own operations against any other thing that may come through as a claim. In that process, we always try as far as possible, which is why I just mentioned there's new formulation assessment, the cost associated with it. Whilst I hear and understand the concern, I would then have to sit with the team internally to reflect. But let's balance that conversation with the risks of what could go wrong if this thing is not done properly. And the last point I wanted to reflect on, we've been getting feedback, and the feedback points to one area of concern, which is longer turnaround time in our testing. It's one area that I always would want to upfront state that we just, I think the CEO mentioned the fact that we just came out of a massive transitional phase organizationally, which impacted operations, and in that period we have also then realized that it may have caused delays, some due to our own internal inefficiencies, and those we are looking at. There are a number of initiatives that we are undertaking internally to try and resource ourselves to be able to capacitate our operations at the right level so that we mitigate against these long turnaround times. And the last point I wanted to reflect on is what the regulator, I think represented by Emma here, is raising. It is not always the case that every requirement for testing will be met because we are also balancing the need for recapitalization to be able to meet some of these requirements. from the small or little kitty that we have internally. So you will have a new need that if you assess the business case, it is not enough immediately for you to then invest. And it becomes another cost because the manufacturers now have to literally go overseas to try and recapitalize, or at least test for them to be able to get the LOAs. We are well aware of that, but it's a conversation that we always, through our own internal feedbacks as the technical infrastructure, then try and balance it out to then see what are the new areas of work that are developing, coming from the regulations that we need to gear ourselves up to be able to test. I think Chair, that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you,
for
Solomon.
today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I see the questions are coming through beyond, so I think this would be an opportune time to move into Q&A, having heard from our panel, and just want to take again the opportunity to thank you. So, panelists, I think we'll go through the questions, and at any point, please, if you want to contribute, we'll try and steer those questions to you. Bjorn, are you going to read them out?
I will do my best to
Okay.
read them out.
Thank you.
There's one lady.
I think you might have to use a mic if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. I'm going to let first someone that is online, who's had a hand up for quite a while, I'm going to just set her open that she can allow to speak. That is Dineo. Dineo, your hand has been up for a while. If you first want to voice your question so we can record it on our side as well. That is Dineo Modise. It's a bit, I can hear you, but it's very, very light.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better.
Alright. My question is around the term food safe chemicals. Right? We get a lot of inquiries from our customers who are manufacturers of food, who when they're having audits, then they're saying auditors are requesting food safe chemicals or some kind of proof that the chemicals used for cleaning and the disinfectants used in their facilities are they actually call them food grade, not food safe, food grade chemicals. And it's a problem, it's a continuous problem that goes on because across any regulation and any standards, there is no definition in South Africa for a chemical that is classified as food grade, because the chemicals used for cleaning are not for human consumption. And across regulations and across standards, the requirement is that these products should be used and then rinsed off surfaces, right? So we need to clear this confusion in the industry, because people are using terms that are not anywhere in the regulations and in any of the standards. And when you think about it, there really isn't a food grade cleaning chemical, because what is food grade? The definition of food grade, according to food regulations themselves and according to Codex Alimentarius, is these are food additives, right? So these are things that can be consumed, that they're classified as food additives, and that is why they are food grade. But cleaning chemicals in of themselves cannot be called food grade. And I would like this language to really be thrown out of our industry, where we are using chemicals for cleaning and for disinfecting of surfaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've heard her. She wants it thrown out. So, who's gonna? Do you want to reply, Amanda?
I'm just trying to figure out, nowhere in the standards of any audit is the word food grade. In SANS 10049, SANS 1033, ISO 22000, nowhere is food grade, the term food grade referred to. I think that is a terminology adopted through the industry of stating whether it's safe to use in the environment, food grade. So I think that is, it's not a term, it's not a legal term to be used, and it's clearly not in any of the standards food grade. It means, is the chemical compliant to the use of food manufacturing and in the industry? And no chemical is food grade, because if you don't use the right dilutions, it's still not going to be safe. So I don't think we must focus on, it is a terminology adopted by a certain industry, but it's not in the standards of auditing. There's no reference, and I've searched now for it. There's no reference for food grade.
Thanks, Kaleka. I think it talks to education. And I think we have embarked on educating the consumers, but I think we need to do more. And we just need to clarify this whole thing. In the same way that we've done the explanations about test reports and SABS mark, but we need to also clarify this, because it's quite pervasive. It's a term that gets used and it becomes a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Beyond, let's move on to the next question from
there's
Teams.
another question from Lovelace. What is SABS doing about South African markets' inability to test against standards such as EN 14476 or versatile claims when there are so many viral outbreaks? Should the SABS not prioritize on having this capacity? I'm asking this for a standpoint of using the SABS as the go-to, and we must tackle that as well, regulator, as an opposed to international standards.
Thank you. Delbert?
So the question is around what should the SABS, yes, remains and should be the go-to person for testing requirements. What we have established as part of us understanding the landscape, one is that we acknowledge that we do not have a capability for everything. In recognizing that, we then went further to devise solutions. One of the solutions that we have done is to look at, firstly, partnering with other sister laboratories, and in some instances even competitor labs, to subcontract or to outsource capacity and capability that we don't have. The second part is where you have manufacturers that have in-house testing capacity and capability. And unfortunately, lately, I'm seeing a lot of manufacturers' laboratories that are accredited. We are then able to invoke another mechanism, we call it on-site testing, which is our way of solutioning for our testing capability challenge. But this specific case is something that I think we can always engage during break, but I see that the caller is online. We can always, Beyond will share our contact details so that we can take it the discussion further to then explore what we can be able to do. The last point is the majority of testing requirements that as a first prize we gear ourselves to test against the South African national standards. There are instances where manufacturers would come in wanting us to test to international standards. And to Kolega's point, you might just find that in some instances it's not even a requirement but it's the test methods that somebody wants us to just do or have capability to test to this test method, and looking at our internal capability is not something we can do. But that is something that I think we can explore, particularly for us to then understand, is it a full-on standard with full-on requirements, or is it just a test method? And we can have that conversation, I think, offline. Thanks.
Yeah, then the next question is from Michelle McLaren. Disinfectant detergents, disinfectants and cleaners for use on inanimated surfaces in the agricultural industry is not regulated by SABS, NRCS and DAFF. What is the plan going forward in this regard? As again, want to just highlight, we're not a regulator in this point.
Disinfectants applied or used in any inanimate surface, doesn't matter what type of establishment, are regulated by the NRCS. So even if, for instance, if it's a pack house, but you're using that disinfectant to clean the tables or to clean the toilets, because disinfectants, they have a huge range of applications. So the only demarcation that we have put in place is if that substance, I'll just call it a substance or a formulation or a mixture, if it does have contact with, say, animals, human, or anything that is a living organism, then that's where we draw a line. So that's why it was so difficult for us to clearly demarcate where our VCs should start and end, because there are other regulators that are in the same space. However, once it comes in contact with live plant, animal, or other types of living organisms or human cells, then it falls out of our compulsory specification. So the understanding should be, in any environment, whether it's a school, it's your domestic environment, it's an agricultural setup in terms of, or maybe it's a pack house, or it's within a farm, or even if it's in an area where they are dealing with animals, if it is solely for the purpose of disinfecting the environment around that activity, that then, by environment, so I should clarify, inanimate surfaces within that environment, then that would then fall within our regulation. So that's why your labeling, your claims are critical, because that's how we evaluate your product. You must tell us, what does your product do? So if you start mentioning animal diseases or human diseases or other fungi that have to do with the plant environment, then we automatically know that this doesn't fall within our regulation. So, but then we can only determine that once you've submitted your product specifications, your formulation, your labeling, your claims, so that we can assess it. So if it falls outside our scope, then we will inform you this falls outside our scope. But if then it is just for general disinfection in any environment, even if it's applied in an environment that may be taken as agricultural or veterinary, then we can still say this product does fall within our scope. Thank you.
Yeah, then one more question in the chat that I would like to highlight is, when a new standard is adopted by SABS, how are the stakeholders notified?
Right, no, thanks for the question. To begin with, we work with stakeholders who are representative of industry, so they sit as technical committee members. So we'll deal with the new work item proposal, where they would then vote for that. Then the general public, we will go through what we call the public inquiry stage, where they get notified. Even at the end, when the standard is now published, we will go back through the government gazette to announce that we have published this document. Must also add that we've highlighted that there's one area where we could keep improving, where we would then do other promotional activities, to promote that standard across the entire industry, even for those who might have missed it when it was being developed, and even when we published it and notified it. We have started, we go to various municipalities. Since last year, we continue this year, just to promote these standards and the use of standards. So that's one way of doing with it. However, as I indicated, it's one area where we will keep on improving on how we then notify the general public and other stakeholders who are not directly involved with us during the development stage.